Your training plan might look perfect on paper, but have you ever wondered if your nutrition is quietly holding you back? I spent years chasing better times and longer distances, only to realize that what I put into my body mattered as much as my running shoes. The pain, sudden crashes, and frustrating plateaus were signals that something was off with my fueling. In this video, I'll break down the real nutrition essentials for runners, how to get electrolytes right, what carb loading actually means, and the recovery snacks that can make or break our next adventure. These aren't just generic tips. They're the results of trial and error and a lot of lessons learned out on the road. I'm ryyoung from runwithryan.org, ultra runner, model, and men's lifestyle creator. Let me show you how small changes to our nutrition plans can transform our runs, starting with the moment I realized how quickly things can go bad when we get it wrong. A few years back, I attempted a solo 250-mile run from Santa Clara, Cuba, back to Havana. There was a stretch of road deep in the Cuban countryside where I learned just how unforgiving small nutrition mistakes can be. The first day of running went well. I had a steady pace, and the energy of the small towns kept pushing me forward. But on the second day, under relentless sun, something shifted. My legs felt they were dragging through sand, my head light and foggy, and every breath seemed to take more effort than the last. My body was sending urgent signals I didn't know yet how to read. I stopped and tried to regroup, thinking water, all I really had with me, would solve everything. I drank what I had, but the exhaustion didn't lift. Instead, cramps crept up my calves and into my thighs, forcing me to halt and reconsider the adventure. A horse and buggy carrying grains passed by. A man yelled down, asked if I was okay. I managed a weak smile, but inside, I was rattled. I always thought hydration was simple. Drink water, keep moving. But the more I tried to push through, the more obvious it became that something deeper was going on. Looking back, I made a classic mistake. I relied on plain water, ignoring the need for electrolytes, especially sodium. In Cuba's heat and humidity, I was sweating out much more than just fluid. My body was losing sodium at a rate I hadn't prepared for, and my water-only approach was diluting the little that was left. I didn't realize then that runners can lose anywhere from 700 to 900 milligrams of sodium per hour through sweat. Most of the electrolyte tablets I packed didn't come close to replacing that, and sugary sports drinks only gave me fleeting boosts before leaving me even more depleted. The symptoms built slowly: dull headache, dizziness, and a strange mix of nausea and bloating. I'd feel thirsty and yet weirdly full, and my thoughts kept slipping away from me as I tried to focus on the road. At one point, I walked with my close friend and best crew ever, Kara, delirious, debating the route ahead, uncertain I could trust my own body to keep going. That moment has always stuck with me. It's a powerful reminder that willpower alone isn't enough when the body is out of balance. After I returned from that run, I spent days digging into what actually happened. I realized that dehydration doesn't just zap muscles. It clouds thinking and makes it almost impossible to make good decisions on the move. The more I read, the more I understood how individual sweat rates and sodium loss can vary. Some runners are salty sweaters, losing far more sodium than average, and I'd never accounted for that. My hydration plan, it was too generic. I started to pay attention to the subtle signs: a creeping headache, legs that felt heavy, the early hints of brain fog. These were my new clues to adjust, not just to push through. By the time I tested this strategy on my next big run, the difference was clear. Cramps didn't return, and my energy stayed steady. I could actually think straight, even deep into the miles. I realized that dialing in hydration and electrolytes is the difference between finishing strong and barely finishing at all. Once I figured out how to keep my body balanced during these long, hot runs, I started to see another pattern. Hydration, it was only part of the equation. What I ate before and during these efforts mattered just as much. I'd always heard that carb loading was the key to endurance, but the more I experimented, the more I questioned whether this standard advice actually worked for me. Carb loading is one of those rituals we hear about everywhere in the running world. People talk about it like a magic trick. Eat enough carbs before a race, and you'll have all the energy you need. At first, I bought into the idea, not having much personal experience to go by. I remember the night before the San Diego Rock and Roll Marathon. It was one of my very first marathons. I sat down to a massive plate of spaghetti and garlic bread, thinking I was setting myself up for a breakthrough. Instead, I woke up feeling weighted down and sluggish. And by the middle of the race, my energy was flat. My legs felt heavy, my mind foggy, and the finish line felt impossibly far away. Not to mention, my stomach churned the entire way. It was a wake-up call that the standard carb loading advice, it doesn't work for me. That experience pushed me to look closer at what carb loading actually means. I learned that the goal is to maximize the body's glycogen reserves, its primary fuel for long runs. But the way I approached it was all off. Research suggests that instead of eating one oversized meal, it's more effective to spread carb intake across the 24 to 48 hours before an event. The numbers are specific. Aim for about 7 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight per day during that window. That's a lot more measured than just piling on plates and plates of pasta at dinner. When I started planning my meals this way, I noticed I had steadier energy and felt lighter on my feet. And the type of carbs we eat, they matter just as much as timing. I realized that complex carbohydrates like brown rice, oats, sweet potatoes, and multigrain bread give me a slow, steady release of energy. They didn't leave me with that bloated, overfull feeling I'd get from heavy, simple carbs. I also found that mixing in easily digestible options like white rice with a sliced banana, they work better for me than dense, fiber-heavy meals that slow digestion. Spacing out my carb intake over a couple of days, it was a game changer. Instead of cramming everything into one meal, I started eating moderate portions of carbs at every meal and snack in the 2 days before a race. This approach prevented the bloating and heaviness that would slow me down. It also made it easier to listen to my body and adjust if I needed more or less food based on how I felt during training. Another lesson was about balance. Early on, I focused so much on carbs that I neglected other nutrients. I eventually realized that including some protein with my carbs, say oatmeal with almond butter or chicken with sweet potatoes, helped my body recover and helped keep my energy stable longer. The goal isn't to stuff in as many carbs as possible. It's to build meals that support both performance and recovery. Whether in travel, they also played a bigger role than I expected. They are crucial to pay attention to when planning out a nutrition plan. Running in heat or humidity changes how the body responds to different foods. On hot days, I lean towards lighter, water-rich carbs like fruit or even pretzels. In cooler weather, I'm more comfortable with heartier options like multigrain bread or quinoa. Stay flexible and pay attention to how different environments affect your digestion and energy. Through trial and error, I learned to tune out generic advice and pay closer attention to my own signals, just as you will. I started to notice when I felt energized during training runs and when I started to fade. Along the way, I'd keep track of which foods left me feeling bloated or jittery and which gave me more lasting energy. Over time, I found that my body prefers complex carbs the day before a big effort and a small, fast-digesting snack like a banana an hour before I took off into a new challenge. It became less about following rules and more about finding the rhythm that worked for me. But carb loading is only one part of the bigger picture. Even after perfecting my pre-run meals, I still struggled with recovery and lingering fatigue. That's when I started to wonder if what I ate after my runs mattered just as much as what I ate before. Spoiler, it does. Recovery nutrition became the missing link I hadn't realized I needed. After long runs, my routine used to be an afterthought. Sometimes a handful of chips, sometimes nothing at all. I remember one particular afternoon, sprawled on the couch after a tough 15-miler, reaching for salty chips and thinking the sodium would help. What I didn't realize then was that while sodium does play a role in rehydration and restoring what's lost in sweat, My body was also desperate for carbohydrates to refill glycogen stores and protein to repair muscle. The next morning, my legs were heavy. My motivation was gone. And I started to see a pattern. The way I refueled after a run directly shapes how I feel the next day. Ignoring recovery meals had become a habit that was quietly chipping away at progress. I chalked up the soreness and fatigue to the grind of training, not realizing I was missing a basic step. There were stretches where I'd watch other runners bounce back for back-to-back efforts, while I dragged through each session, feeling like I was always starting from zero. It crept into my mindset too. When I felt depleted and unprepared, running would stop becoming something I looked forward to. But things started to turn when I paid more attention to what experienced runners did after their workouts. I noticed a trend. Their post-run meals weren't elaborate, but they definitely had a clear purpose. I saw people reach for Greek yogurt with fruit, peanut butter on toast, or a quick protein smoothie. Simple combinations that check the right boxes for recovery. I realized that convenience didn't have to mean sacrificing the essentials. Being the nerd that I am, digging into the science gave me an even fuller perspective. During a run, muscles use up glycogen, and the physical stress causes micro tears in muscle fibers. To recover well, we need to replenish those glycogen stores with carbohydrates and give our muscles the protein they need to repair. The window for this is surprisingly short. Research shows that eating a meal or snack with 20 to 30 grams of protein and a good source of carbohydrates within 30 minutes after a run can make a measurable difference in recovery and next day performance. For me, that meant rethinking my habits. Instead of skipping recovery or reaching for whatever was nearby, I started preparing simple options ahead of time. Greek yogurt with berries and a drizzle of honey became a go-to. Sometimes I make a peanut butter and banana sandwich, or blend a smoothie with protein powder, banana, and some spinach. On days when I crave something heartier, an egg on toast or a turkey sandwich on whole grain bread does the trick. I paid attention to the numbers, aiming for about 20 to 30 grams of protein, especially after those tough sessions. The more consistent I became, the more I noticed the benefits. My legs would bounce back faster, and I didn't dread the next run. The mental fog that used to follow long efforts, it started to lift. I even found myself looking forward to post-run meals. They're a chance to reset, not just physically, but mentally. The process isn't about strict rules or specific ratios every time. It's about building a reliable routine that makes recovery automatic. I also learned that recovery nutrition can be flexible. Some days, a quick protein shake is all I have time for. Other days, usually weekends, maybe I'd sit down for a full meal. What matters is the combination. Carbs to refill energy, proteins to rebuild muscle, and enough sodium to rehydrate. Keep in mind, the details change based on where I am or what I have on hand, but the principles stay the same. When I take a moment to reflect on this shift, I can see how much my approach to running has evolved. Recovery nutrition is about building a foundation for long-term energy and resilience. The more I paid attention to what my body needed after a run, the more I understood how every part of my nutrition plan all had to fit together. That realization made me start thinking differently about the bigger picture. If recovery meals could have such a big impact, what else could I change if I built a nutrition plan that truly adapted to my life, my training, and the unpredictability of travel and adventure? That question, it became the next step in my journey. I quickly realized that building a personal runner's diet starts with recognizing that no single formula works for every situation. I remember when I first tried to follow a nutrition plan, treating it like a checklist that would guarantee results. But life has a way of complicating things. Travel, unpredictable weather, long workdays, and shifting goals all forced me to reconsider a rigid approach. I realized that for my running and my lifestyle to thrive, my nutrition would need to adapt, not just to my training, but to everything around me. One of the first times I felt this disconnect was during a solo trip while training for a long-distance race. I wasn't all that far away from home, a few hours away in southern Utah. The carefully planned meals I'd have routinely at home didn't survive the reality of being on the ground in a location new to me, without the familiarity of my kitchen to prepare. Instead of the Greek salad I've been having for years as a late lunch, I remember ending up with just a bag of crackers as a meal. What was I doing? The meals I was having there left me underfueled and frustrated, especially when I would face a long morning run. Looking back, it wasn't the lack of food that held me back. It was my lack of flexibility. I hadn't learned how to adjust on the fly, and that cost me energy and focus. At home, I started to notice the same rigidness in smaller ways. When the summer heat crept in, my usual breakfast, overnight oats, felt too heavy and sat in my stomach during morning runs. Instead of forcing it, I started experimenting with lighter options, like blending fruit and nut smoothies. Swapping oats for a mix of frozen berries, a banana, and a spoonful of almond butter made all the difference. The smoothie was hydrating, easy to digest, and still packed with nutrients. In the cooler months, I'd return to heartier meals, something with a bit more substance with nuts and cinnamon. But over time, as I gained the ability to adapt, I also learned to pay attention to how my body responds to different foods and environments, rather than sticking to a single routine. Simplifying my diet made adaptation even easier. I started to rely on whole foods no matter where I might be traveling. Fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, and healthy fats. They're the foundation of every meal. Whole food carbohydrates like sweet potatoes or brown rice bring more than just energy. They provide micronutrients like potassium and magnesium, essential for muscle function and recovery. When I can't find my usual snacks, I turn to portable options. A banana, a handful of almonds, or maybe even a hard-boiled egg. These go-tos keep me fueled, whether I'm running errands or exploring a new city, and I don't have to stress about finding the perfect snack. As we covered earlier, hydration, it's another area where I learned to adapt. I've learned to carry single-serve electrolyte powders that I can add to any water bottle, adjusting the amount based on the weather and how much I sweat. But even when not training, I've learned to notice subtler shifts of dehydration, dry lips, sluggishness, trouble focusing, and I respond before these become bigger issues. The biggest lesson came from learning to listen to my body and its unique signals. The body often knows what it needs, when it needs it, if we're willing to pay attention. This habit of tuning in time, it expands beyond running. I've learned to eat more intuitively, enjoy my meals, and adapt to new situations without losing sight of what fuels me best. Whether I'm home, traveling, or facing unexpected challenges, I focus on whole foods, hydration, and listening to hunger, energy, and digestive cues. If a certain food leaves me feeling heavy or unfocused, I swap it out. If I feel strong and clear-headed after a meal, I remember that combination for the next time. Because ultimately, a flexible runner's diet isn't about following strict rules or chasing the latest trends. It's about building a framework that evolves with our goals, environment, and our day-to-day lives. The more I practice this, the more consistent my energy becomes, on the run and everywhere else. And as I reflect on what fuels my adventures, I keep coming back to one simple truth. The foundation of every run, every challenge, and every new experience is built on the choices I make with food and hydration. Personalizing my nutrition changed more than just my training. It started to shape how I felt every day. I noticed the difference first on a quiet morning, heading out for a run after a week of paying closer attention to what I ate and drank. My legs felt lighter, my mind clearer. And this too will happen for you. Give it a few days. Pay close attention to how you hydrate, what you eat to fuel the body, and how you feel before, during, and after a run. It's not about chasing a formula, but about tuning in to your unique needs and being willing to adjust. If there's one thing I'd share from my experience, it's trust your body. Experiment with electrolytes, carbs, and protein, and build a diet that fuels every adventure. Each small adjustment brings us closer to understanding what helps us feel strong and resilient, on the road and beyond. If you found this video to be useful, insightful, I'd love it if you considered joining the Luxury of Adventure Premium Club on runwithryyoung.org. All of my videos get posted there first. There's always new tips and suggestions on travel and adventure, on health and wellness, and of course on running. and even some men's style. Joining there would be an incredible way to show your support. Thank you. Or consider subscribing here on YouTube. Tap that button down below, and yeah, go ahead, hit the notifications. Remember, the process is ongoing, and every run, if we listen, will give us feedback. So what are you learning along the way? What foods are fueling you best? Leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear. Food, nutrition, and hydration, they're the building blocks to a solid foundation from which we continue to increase our distance covered. If you'd like to hear more about ways to improve the distance you're currently running, go ahead and check out this video right here. And thank you for sticking through this one with me. Keep me posted and reach out with any questions. Thanks again, and enjoy your next run. I'll see you back here soon.